Thank you for staying with us. The word Japa has become an anthem for many Nigerians as they look to leave the country in search of greener pastures. According to a research study, 7 out of every 10 Nigerians will leave the country if given the opportunity to do so. One of the economic effects of migration is that it leads to brain drain, a situation where a country witnesses a high number of its best hands of professionals leaving the country. The crop of individuals leaving the country are youth who have been trained and graduated from university, from the medical space, engineering, and others. Although many say insecurity and corruption are some of the reasons to leave, the economic setback remains a big consequence for this migration. Well, joining us in the studio is a strategy consultant and public affairs analyst, Japa. Japa, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We also have via Zoom from the UK, founder, CEO, People Ump, UK, Olariwaju Idowu. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I say good morning.
All right. Now, first of all, tell us why you left the shores of the country, because this matter of Japa, everybody have their varying reasons why they want to leave the country. You are outside the country. What spurred you leaving the country in the first place?
Thank you very much for having me. So for me, when people use the word Japa, Japa to different people actually mean different things. So for someone like me, it's not out of desperation. Yeah, so I worked Procter & Gamble for over 10 years and led different roles. So I've worked in Switzerland before, so I've always been like a global citizen. So my major driver for leaving the shores of the country is because I've done a lot of work, and it's just, you get to that point in your career where you need to get to have that global outlook. By the way, to give you context to that, I was an HR VP, in a big startup in Nigeria, at the time in which I left the country. In fact, by the time I left the country, I was still working with the company remotely for over 2 years before I left the company for another company in the UK and kept on driving my startup in the UK.
Interesting. But a lot of people adduce the fact that Nigerians are leaving the country, Africans generally, for greener pastures. It shows that you are a global citizen. How do you see others who are going to other countries, for a better, the greener side of the world?
Yes. It's good to also lay some premise very, very clear. We know that majority of people that live today is out of desperation because people definitely have lost hope in the country one way or the other. I've been victim also at different times. So I think those also will have propelled individuals to make that move or say, I need to leave Nigeria. So sometimes, or majority of that number is actually out of hopelessness in the direction of the country. And you see a lot of move on that. Particularly, for example, people at my level, majority of us could have actually stayed back in Nigeria. But sometimes when you assess the scenario and you don't see a lot of stability, you don't see that hope, at the end of the tunnel, they just have to make that decision to find a place where you can actually have that stability for yourself. So for majority of them is actually out of that hopelessness, in that future of the country.
Right, let's take the conversation to the studio now. Japa, stemming from what Olariwaju has said, you are still in the country. It seems you still have hope for this country.
Yes, so the fact remains that not everybody can leave.
Okay.
So not everybody can leave, and like we've said, different people have different reasons for leaving, right. And it's really not a priority for everyone to leave. It's also not practical for everyone to leave, and people also need to understand that the fact that you either choose to leave or stay has to really feed into what you believe your future holds for you. If you would maximize whatever potentials you have within the shores of this country and then you go somewhere else, you may find yourself in trouble. For example, as much as we like to say that the country has a lot of challenges, a lot of people will also tell you that it gives room for a lot of opportunity. So some people choose to approach from a business perspective and say, what are the challenges that are available? What are the opportunities I can craft from it? Provide solutions, provide value to the market.
And that is what has been working for you?
So far, but it has been challenging, as a lot of people will tell you. But I mean, like we like to say that migration is not a new phenomenon. It didn't start with Nigerians. It's basic human nature, and it's really the nature of, if not all living things, because even birds themselves have to travel to certain locations at a certain time of the year, either for winter or for summer, and they come back to their main base. So this is what happens a lot. But in the case where we have a lot of people living now in droves, like he rightly said, it stems from people having some sense of hopelessness in how the situation of the country has been, and where they don't see the situation of the country as situated now to be of any immediate or future benefits to their own potentials, to their own future, to their own families, to their own children. So that's why certain people are leaving at this time.
Is it a matter of people leaving and because they do not feel, they did not see that hope, that glimmer of hope to stay back in the country? Do you feel the government is really doing so much to put the right policies in place to ensure that Nigerians stay back, or are there no policies on the ground at all?
Okay, well, the government of the day right now, I believe, somehow is still trying to get their footing. After a couple of months, we understand that they need to clear a lot of rot in the system. But I believe that they need to do a lot if they're doing whatever they're doing now, whatever ratio. They need to do a lot more to ensure that they adequately communicate to Nigerians, not just in words, but in actions, to let people know that, yes, these are the indicators for you to have actual hope in the system, that you can make it here, that your future is secure here. Because a lot of people will leave for cases of just insecurity. I mean, we've had a lot of cases of where certain people come into the country for a brief period for a family event, and then they became victims of some type of insecurity, and they vowed not to come back to the country. Even some people have said that they shouldn't even be buried when they die here, when they die abroad. So, I mean, those cases are there, and we must see how we address the root causes of this mass migration. It's not enough to say that people are leaving and then there are a lot more people staying back, because we must also understand that we may not be able to adequately quantify what it's costing us, especially economically, but it is costing us a lot every week, every month, every year. So we must see how we stem the tide. We may not be able to totally eliminate it, because it isn't really possible to do that. I mean, we have foreigners in our country right now, in countries that we will term first world. So they come here for opportunity. So we would also go somewhere else for opportunity. There's no big deal in that. But we must also see how most of our productive population that have a lot to offer us as a nation don't find their way out of the shores of this country while we're trying to get things right.
Interesting. Let's bring this conversation, take it to Olarinwaju. I was listening to a video yesterday where a speaker, a South African speaker, Vusi, was saying that a country whose economy is driven by connection as against competence will continue to witness its top talents leave. Would you say this might be the root cause of what we are seeing in Nigeria, where we have a number of our top talents leaving the shores of the country?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And this is actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about. To give you a context today, one of the things that make a country very suitable to live in is actually having access to equal opportunity. And mark that particular word, equal opportunity. You want to be in a country where merit and excellence actually play a major role for you to be able to grow yourself. So today, what you find out in our kind of an environment is that you find a place whereby it's not about merit, it's about you knowing somebody. It's not about your quality relationship, it's just about your connection. And in that way, what happened is that somebody who spend a lot of time and is hard work to build something for himself or herself, find himself or herself in a situation whereby the person is not able to come to the limelight, and this person actually struggled, and it looks like, oh, this is like fruitless effort for you. So when you don't reward hard work, when you don't reward excellence, when you don't reward merit, and you will get to a point where people make a joke about it and say, the first-class student, it does not make sense for you to go to school because you have a lot of friends who are first-class students who are still struggling out there, yeah, and they don't even have access to further education for them to be able to grow more and contribute to the economy. So you see that this now becomes like a major one for people. And we need to create a country where merit becomes a measure for you to be able to grow. Hard work becomes that value that we put a lot of effort and attention to. And that's the reason why today you could see a lot of the youth get involved in other things like drugs, see them getting involved in cybercrime. It does not take away the fact that there are still a lot of youth out there who are putting their effort in place to make sure that something really works for themselves. And it's good to also put something on context here that because you choose to stay back in Nigeria or because you're in Nigeria does not make you more patriotic than somebody who is out of Nigeria. For example, today, I'm out of Nigeria. However, majority of talent that we consult for and we build today, they are majorly resident in Nigeria. Out of 10 of them are majorly resident in Nigeria. So I was in Nigeria last month, for example. I organized more than 4 leadership programs in Nigeria to train people, the younger ones, in higher institutions. So oftentimes, you live in Nigeria, oftentimes or most times for someone like me, increases your patriotism because you see that system work here. You see that a lot of things are working. You want to start your business from the comfort of your house. You go online, register your business. Before you know it, 3 days, your business is in 5 minutes, your business is registered. 2 days, you become a director of a company. You start bidding. You can write to anybody and make a proposal to them. If you are good enough, they call you for bidding and you find your way through. This is what you don't really have as an extra thing for you in Nigeria. And for us to be able to, retain our people, these are the things we need to attend to. For example, doctors. Look at the case of doctors, for example. Yeah. And we need to also say the good side of Nigeria. We spend a lot of money. People can argue and say the facilities are not good enough. But we spend a lot of money to train you in Nigeria for like 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, only for us to lose them. Why do we lose them? Do you want to blame them? You can't blame them. Why? They need to grow their family. Yeah. Imagine I'm a doctor, I'm the husband, and you could imagine a patriarchal kind of thinking in Africa, and I can't fend for my family, and I call myself a doctor. And people make an insult on that. I look at doctors, they are very poor in Nigeria. You go to hospital, and you don't see them really working. And because of that, we develop a lot of quack nurses, which you can understand the reason why those things really happen. So if I can't get right medical attention, if I can't have an access, today I have an emergency. I'm treated like the Prime Minister of the UK. Why? Because I have the same access to the healthcare. So today in Nigeria, if I fall or I drop on the road, I see accidents on the road. The last time I came around to Nigeria, people were just taking mobile phone to take pictures of those kind of a thing. Now, why? Because there's no emergency response, because the value of life actually is very low. These are the reasons to that. If you can address all these things, you will really realize that majority of these people that are living for the reason of hopelessness, for the reason of not seeing that green light, they will be retained. Definitely, like we rightly said, you cannot take away migration. Migration historically has always been the benefit of every country. Let me give you an example. 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I was growing up, I remember how we used to describe the Chinese people in Nigeria. I want to say that on national TV. You can imagine what happened 30 years after to the Chinese. Imagine 15 years ago, some phones in Nigeria, I don't want to give an advert to them. We used to call them in local language, a palasa phone. These phones today in Nigeria, they cost over $500,000 naira. Why? Because these guys grew over time. They appreciated their journey 20 years ago. When we used to buy their TV, their radio, 30 years ago, we used to call them fake. In fact, we call them something make. I don't want to be ethnic about it. But today, they are the one that dominate Nigerian market. You go to every home today, out of 10 homes, 7 homes have their electronics. Why? Because they built themselves over time, appreciated their journey, and their people migrated across the world. We see them today in Nigeria. And so we need to encourage it, but encourage it in a positive way, in such a way that add value to us as a country.
Right, Olawale, I'd like to stay with you on the point that you made earlier, that last time you were in Nigeria, you saw an accident and then people were taking pictures. I feel these are some of the things that we say about Nigeria that's not completely correct. Reason being that we've seen places, houses that have gone ablaze, and then you see firefighters coming down there to rescue situations. Sometimes they are able to rescue it. We see collapsed buildings where emergency responders are really on top of their game. It may not be 100%. So what would you say as regards the kind of narrative and the kind of perspective that some Nigerians have about their own country, which necessarily is not the same? Because even outside of the country, there are some things that go wrong where the citizens will be saying the government is not on top of their games. But then you hardly see this on the social media. So how would you advise Nigerians in terms of seeing their country in a better perspective as against the negative narrative we sell to the outside world?
Thank you very much for that question, because I'm an extremely patriotic Nigerian and I advocate a lot for this. This is why if you go online today, you see I'm an advocate of Japa with pride. I don't think you should be desperate to leave the country. You should leave the country with pride. And that's what I advocate for. Let me give you a context to that, yeah? So I was a former Senate president when I was in school in OAU. And everybody knows what I drive for. And I drive for a slogan called the New Breed of Nigerians, of the younger ones that will change the narrative. But let me tell you a positive side of it that we also put on the national TV. Today, I'm in the UK. May I tell you, and you can use me as a reference, I've not been able to get an appointment, for example, with the medical service. You go online today, go to their parliament, there are a lot of issues. The medical attention in the UK is going down. Emergency response, good, but medical attention, basic medical attention, you couldn't get it. My personal story as an example, my 2 boys had chickenpox. I called NHS more than 10 times. No response from anybody until I had to find a solution to myself. I had to flare up with the individuals on the phone with me. My son had chickenpox. Guys, what is happening here? In Nigeria, we had medical insurance. My son had chickenpox. What do? I get into my car, get to the hospital, and get tested. So oftentimes, we paint Nigeria very bad. Let me give you more example to that. I wanted to do a full body check, right? I booked an appointment to get this done. I'm not able to do that. What did I do? I came to Nigeria, get my medical check done. So oftentimes people push a narrative that we are bad, but we are not as bad as painted. Let me give you more example to that. Our nurses, we school you in Nigeria. Somebody say, academic system in Nigeria is very bad. It is not true. I schooled my first degree in Nigeria. I had my MBA in Nigeria. I went to Japa Polytechnic in Nigeria with a distinction. I came to UK. I also had a master's in Cranfield University. And I could compare myself with anybody in the world. We came from one of the best schools in the world. They couldn't compete with us. So we can say Nigeria is bad because we want it to be better than where it is today. But guess what? Nigeria is extremely very good on many areas. The same nurse that we train in Nigeria, the same nurse comes to UK, writes one exam, becomes a full-time nurse in the UK. The same doctor we train in Nigeria that we abuse, come to the UK, write an exam, becomes a doctor in the UK. Nobody says you need to be a doctor afresh. Then give credit to Nigeria. So, well, we can be better across all sides. We can be better in many areas. Some things you hear and you just grin. However, we are good in many areas. Last one, to get these glasses. I had to get these glasses from Nigeria. To get the glasses here is freaking lot of money. So these are the things, because it's painted, oh, there's medical insurance in the UK, there's medical this one in the US, and co. It's not true across board. It's just narrative. And I think the media can also do a lot of work to let people know that these are the things you need to do. I don't want to talk about people that come here to study. I don't want to talk about it. I charge the journalists in Nigeria today, and maybe TVC can take it up. Please do a survey. I've done my survey myself. Do a survey, anonymous survey of Nigerians who have come to the UK to study their masters. I can bet with you today that 7 out of 10 of them, they don't get job after they leave or they finish their masters. Then why do you insult Nigeria? People have to resort into the other things. So we are good as a country. We can do a lot of things more as a country, retain our best of talent, but there's a limit to what you can do about it. Let's create an enabling environment for them to try. For those that stay back, and for those that leave, also find a way to attract them back to Nigeria to be able to contribute more to Nigeria as a whole.
Interesting that you made that point, because recently there was a conversation around this matter of Japa syndrome being somewhat beneficial to Nigeria, because whatever talents, whatever you have learned outside the country, that persons can return to the country and also make that, knowledge beneficial to the people, like what you mentioned that you have done, coming to train some persons in the country, so to speak. And that is where I bring it to you now, Diko, talking about this matter of Japa not necessarily being bad as we are looking at it. Yes, people are living in droves. We are losing the number of talents. But then again, they are trying to return home to do something, like Olarin, what you mentioned, for the country.
Yes, so that's where it becomes incumbent upon us as a people to see, and the government as well, to see that they have good reasons to return. I mean, I know of a few medical professionals that every other time, maybe once a year, try to return to the country to do some form of CSR. They come here, I mean, blazing professionals in the US and the UK come to Nigeria to volunteer their time and expertise to see how they can transfer some knowledge to their colleagues down here. But we must also see how we improve things here, and that they don't get to fear for their lives for returning. Because if there's an issue of large-scale insecurity and the embassy over there or Home Office or State Department is issuing a report and saying, okay, don't go to this particular community, don't go to this particular state, and those are the places they need to be to get the maximum impact, that means they're not getting access. That means those places are not getting access to them. So we must see how we make the nation safer, not just for people that want to return, but for those of us that are here as well. And that's what we're talking about. And yes, it is important that we see how we project the positives in the country.
That's right.
No place is all bad. No person is all bad. You just need to look at it from a different perspective, right? And we must see how the positives that we have are sustained over time and in our faces as well. And it isn't just enough to have those positives sustained and to be in our faces. We must see how they reach a critical mass of people, because that is the only way it can get out there. If we're saying certain things are positives and the only people that are benefiting from it are 2 out of 10, it is positive, but by what ratio?
Right.
So we must see how those positives cascade across a lot of Nigerians, where it then becomes a common narrative on the lips of people. So we must see how that is something that is done, and the government must see how they go into, I mean, people will tell you that this year isn't over yet, but I mean, we're looking at 2024. But they must see how we're going into the new year as well as ending this year with these thoughts in mind, because we must drive positive narratives by action. We cannot drive narratives by narratives. We can only drive narratives by action.
And it's on this, sorry to butt in, it's on, because of our time, it's on this that I want to ask you this question regarding the insecurity and the way it's been reported, and some of the directories that are issued by these developed world, US, for instance, they will say do not go to certain states in Nigeria. But I tend to wonder how they're not able to get their own intel about someone who will carry gun, AK-47 or any kind of guns, get into supermarket, public places and start shooting and start killing people. This hardly happens in Nigeria, except in certain areas. It's not as widespread as we see in this developed world, especially US, where more than 50,000 people are recorded to have been killed in a year through gun violence, and they are facing it. So if you want to place this side by side, Nigeria, for instance, how would you situate this, or how would you assess this?
Well, the issue of gun violence in the US is more of a political conversation than a moral one or a common sense one, like I like to have the conversation. And they have their reasons for not tackling it head on. But it goes back to us understanding the power of effective communication and the power of perception. Now, you go to places like San Francisco today, they have a serious drug epidemic. I mean, a very serious one. In the worst parts of Nigeria, I don't even believe we have it like that, where you have a lot of homeless people in Los Angeles, people are sleeping in cardboards in front of hotels that you get to pay $1,000 a night, and then you come out, the first thing you smell is urine, you see people in front, and the question is, what am I really paying for if I'm paying this much to stay in your hotel? So they don't project a lot of those negatives.
That's right.
As opposed to how we go about projecting them here. Now, doesn't mean that they are not true or they are not facts. It just goes to show how representation matters and how we understand the place of representation when it comes to our own identity and our own issues and challenges as well as our wins. So I believe the same reason why we do not project our wins is the same reason why we get to project a lot of where we don't win. But we must do better as a people, and the government must do better for us as well.
All right. Let me come back to you now, Olanrewaju. I think yesterday, the Coordinating Minister for Health and Social Welfare, Dr. Mohammed Ali Pate, declared a state of emergency on the health sector at the 64th National Council on Health. The challenges with regards to the health sector, one of which is the shortage of personnel and experienced hands, basically, to addressing the myriad of issues we are facing in that sector. And I'm wondering how you interpret this declaration of a state of emergency, if that is the way to go to addressing what we are facing with regards to that, because this is all part of the Japa syndrome, the brain drain that we're talking about.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And I think I would just like to answer this, because you hear this all the time. You know, when people try to raise an alarm about the brain drain in Nigeria. And the question you want to ask next is, what are you doing to that? You can say, and there's an emergency, but every emergency like this needs to be backed up with policy document in terms of what do you want to do about it. Telling us that we have corruption issue in Nigeria is not enough. Telling us security issue in Nigeria is bad is not enough. How do you want to tackle it? And I want to give some practical examples that government can actually take and such agency can actually take an action on. And number one is that, look at it today, we have over 2 million students as undergraduates. We graduate over 600,000 of them like every other year. Now, our problem today is not that out of our 100 talents, that 2 of them are leaving. Our problem today is that the 98% of them are getting rotten. That is where our challenge is. Now, one of the things we can do is that we need education at scale. That is the first thing Nigerian government needs to do. We can't do education like the Western world. The population in the UK is less than 70 million. Nigerian population is close to over 200 million. We need to educate at scale. What does that mean? Leverage technology to do a lot of e-learning training. That is number one. Leverage technology to do mass training of the people. Today, I beg to say it, I know there's an organization today that already, I know like ABU, for example, is doing online nursing program as an example, where you can write your exams and get assigned to teaching hospital. Yeah. Imagine if all institutions in Nigeria get into a nursing program and you offer scholarship. That's the second part. Offer incentive for such kind of education. If you realize that the health sector has a problem, then offer scholarship, offer incentive for such kind of education. Nigeria can churn out over 200,000 nurses in 4 years. Imagine you get them across all regions in Nigeria, and we train them, e-learning, assign them to different teaching hospitals where they can do their practicals. We will churn them out in large numbers. That is the second part. Offer them incentives. Now, what is the third part to this? The third part to this is that we need to get to that level where you don't have to be in university for you to contribute and add value to the economy. Today, you go around the world, an average American, like, look at them. Not all of them go to university. An average Briton don't go to university. After they are, like, year left and they write their exams, like, they are done. A-levels, they are done. They get into the job space. How do we make sure that our technical education are functioning? We call them agberos, but they are the people that we are irresponsible to. How do we get them into manufacturing, as an example? I used to be an HR manager in a manufacturing firm in Nigeria, and I know what it takes to develop people in the community. And we hired over 1,000 contractors from the community. Some of them joined us as employees. To train them and get them to productive work does not take rocket science. I've seen complex manufacturing environment. We should not make this thing look like rocket science. To have manufacturing companies today, let's even start with assembly. Let's forget designing first. Let's start with assembly. Can we assemble the best of phones in the world? The answer is yes. Why? I know the technology is not rocket science. So we need to not over-glorify like university over every other thing. You can add value. You go to technical for technical education. And what is the last part? The last part in the world today is that, can we invest in technology? Technology today is not you programming. Technology today is you having data skill that can add value to the business. It can make our government more productive. It can make businesses more productive. Let us invest in in technology skills. Let me give an example today. Today we talk about the Indians. And the Indians are all over the places. You go to the tech sector in the UK, in the startup space in the UK where I play today, you see a lot of Indians there. Why? Because over 30 years ago, their government invested a lot in technology education. Today, for you to become a data analyst today does not take you more than 1 year. Why can't Kwara State produce 1,000 data analysts and go to companies in the world and say, we build you a hub, we give you tax-free, employ our people, let them work for you remotely, and they can make money. What happens is that they make dollars, they make pounds, and they can still stay in their Kwara State, and they can add value. To be a web designer today does not take rocket science. You don't have to go to university to be a web designer, to be a digital marketer. We see them online today. So we can leverage a lot and get our youth actively engaged. For example, today, because of fraud reasons, PayPal, you can't open PayPal accounts in Nigeria. For good reasons, I'm doing legitimate business. I can't open PayPal business in Nigeria. This is where government can now go into play and begin to discuss with all these companies and say, we can deal with the fraud part, but there are genuine people in Nigeria today that want to receive funds from their business partner across the world. When I was in Nigeria and I was doing freelancing, if I wanted to receive money from somebody across the world, I needed to call my friend in the US and say, give me your account, somebody will pay into it. When they could have just gone to my PayPal account and pay for me. These are the things that stifle people back in Nigeria who are doing productive work to leave. If government can begin to engage all these companies to now do a lot of technology awareness, not just software development. Look at it now. AI is now the thing in now. What is government doing across the region, across the states in Nigeria to begin to develop that? Next 10 years, AI will take over the world. If you don't put people now, you don't put people that are graduating now into artificial intelligence, what happens is that you will realize that the company will come and begin to bring their initiative into our judicial system. Today, we don't need to do a lot of complex research as a lawyer. That's AI right. Can do a lot of research for you. These are the things that we can do to help the country to really grow. Not only saying there's an emergency. Emergency, what are the policy documents to back it up? Thank you.
Right. Deepo, let me come to you. I would have loved to ask this from Olariwaju, but I think he spoke to some of those things already. So I'd like to ask you, we've seen a lot of Nigerians, people who have, good jobs in Nigeria, some bank managers, some people who are selling their properties worth 20 million naira, 30 million naira, and they Japa, so to speak. And you see them getting into casualizations, getting to doing some menial jobs and all of that, what they would otherwise not do in Nigeria. And that money does not even, it doesn't equate. If you convert 20 million naira to the dollar, you know what it's going to give you. So what would you say regarding those who also go through illegal migration routes, falling into the hands of criminals? Some, they're harvesting their whole organs. Is that grass always greener on the other side as they paint it?
Oh, no, it's not. I remember maybe a year or two ago, we discussed illegal migration and the victims. If you remember, I think we discussed it here a year or two ago, where there was a lot of testimonies and accounts of people who were trying to travel to Europe through the desert and what the experiences were and how horrifying it was, and there was a lot of outrage globally about it. And we thought it had led to a lot of awareness with people. Unfortunately, it didn't, and it hasn't stopped it, because I remember, I believe it was last year, during the time of the last administration, where I believe it was NIDCOM that they flew a couple of Nigerians back from, I think, maybe Libya or somewhere. And
Libya,
Sudan, yes. And part of the people that they were able to elf back to Nigeria, while they were interviewing her, said that she's planning to get some money within a week to re-embark on that journey that she was just saved from. Yes. So it was all over the news then, that she was planning to re-embark on that same journey through that same route that she was just rescued from. So human nature, we have free will.
Desperation.
The desperation is there. And on some level, for me, it is a bit instructive, because it tells you how much a lot of people have given up in the system. Because with I would have thought that with everything that they saw there, the thought of maybe even traveling from Lagos to Ibadan should even give them some trauma to begin with. You're just like, you know what, I don't want to leave my street for like a year. I don't want to go anywhere. And these people are saying, you know what, I would see how I can gather more resources to embark on that same journey.
Yeah.
And these are the same people that will tell you that while they were ashore, they saw a couple of boats capsize. They saw a lot of people die, women and children.
I had a gatesman like that.
Yes, and that they're willing to still embark on that same journey. So it really shows that a lot of people have quite given up on the system. So that is the mentality that we need to address by our actions. And those are the things that the government needs to look at. That's part of the hopelessness, because a hopeless person cannot really be very productive to you if we're being sincere about it. And the person who isn't productive cannot grow your society, cannot pay taxes.
That's right.
So when we're saying we're broke and we're saying address the educational system, all these things are tied together.
Right.
I must see how we address them holistically when we're trying to have this conversation.
What would be that glimmer of hope that you think would give some persons that level of confidence to say, you know what, government is taking certain steps and decisions, I will stay back to see where this leads us? What would that be in your perspective, quickly?
Well, it should begin from building a system where merit counts, because that's also part of the issue why a lot of people are leaving. They're saying we have this expertise, they went to school, finished with first class. There was time that this mantra was around that school na scam, because you had people who saw their older siblings go to school. Out of the 4 of them, he's the last born. He saw 3 older brothers go to school. They graduate from school, 5 years in between them. Nobody has a meaningful
Matter of fact,
job.
a university still awards 1,000 naira for first-class graduates. You know.
Yes, so where is the incentive? And then you have folks who go on reality TV shows, and let's not get into that. So we must see how we associate merit with effort. Because when that is absent in the system, we will have breakdown of the value system, because in the end, primarily where we have a huge number of poverty or impoverished or people who are below the poverty line, the primary instinct is survival. And we must understand that as human beings, people would likely reverse to their base nature where survival is concerned, where the survival of their children is concerned. So it's not all this English that we're speaking. When it comes down to survival, that's when you know that English isn't really cutting it. And that's where people have to do certain things to make sure that they survive. So we must see how we get people out of that survival mode to where we are saying we're living with basic human dignity to begin with, because that is where the level of hope starts to come from. It starts from having systems in place, educational systems in place with valid and valued educational curriculum that prepares our people for the future. So you don't just have people graduating and then wondering what's going on in the world of work.
Right. Your final word, Olanrewaju, because our time is up, as quickly as 30 seconds.
Yeah, my final word to anybody listening to me, whether the young ones out there or anyone out there, is that, stay true to your dream. Your dream is extremely very valid. And I would just want everyone to also know Nigeria is a very good place to stay, right? However, if it doesn't work well for you, you don't have to feel bad to exit from Nigeria. You don't have to feel bad about it. The only thing is that always be a true patriot anywhere you are.
All right.
And that is the point. And for government, it's very clear. From my Yoruba background, people cannot be hungry and you are discussing something else. And in my HR experience, is the Maslow hierarchy of need.
Right.
People have that desire for psychological need. If you don't meet that, don't have any other kind of conversation.
All right. We must thank you now, Olanrewaju, founder, CEO, People Amp UK. Thank you for your time, as well as strategy consultant and public affairs analyst, Dikpo Iwole. Thank you as well.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Right.
Thank you.